She went to the abandoned well as she was told and found both men there. "What do the both of you have to say to me that cannot wait?" Kosiso asked innocently. Kosiso was happy that things had been settled amicably between she and her ex-suitors. Then she was about going back to continue preparations when all of a sudden, a powdery substance was blown onto her face. She became dizzy immediately, tripped, and fell into the dark abandoned well. She hit her head and went unconscious. Once upon a time, there lived a woman named Kosiso. Kosiso was a very beautiful young lady. Her skin and eyes sparkled like the stars. Even her smile could light up the darkest days, and she was admired by women of all ages. Wherever she went, people whispered and talked about how beautiful she was. The men were also not left out. They gambled on who was going to end up getting married to her, as she was the dream of every man in the village. But Kosiso had two major suitors in the village, and they were Tobe and Amadi. Amadi was the strongest warrior in the village. Being the strongest warrior made him so successful, as he won most of the fights and was rewarded hugely. He was also very wealthy, and he loved Kosiso so much. However, Amadi had a trait which Kosiso detested so much. He was quick to anger and challenge anyone who angered him. Other than that, he was a very good man and did all he could to make Kosiso happy. Tobe, on the other hand, was a simple and straightforward man who always put on a black attire. He was a wealthy man like Amadi and was cool-headed. But Kosiso felt something off about Tobe, but she couldn't place what it was. Maybe it was his constant black outfit that he wore. She wasn't sure. Ifeoma and Uzo were the best friends of Kosiso. They were like sisters to her. Both of them usually advised Kosiso on what to do, especially concerning her suitors. Kosiso had no other friends in the village, so she solely depended on Ifeoma and Uzo, and she never took their advice for granted. Kosiso was a businesswoman in the village, and she sold foodstuff and other condiments in the market. She was also very successful in her business. One day, while she was discussing with her friends, Ifeoma and Uzo, Tobe came to pay her a visit, as he had usually done. So Ifeoma and Uzo excused themselves, and Kosiso began talking to Tobe. During their conversation, she asked him why he always wore black clothes, as she had never seen him in any other color of clothes. It seemed suspicious, and she wanted to know the reason, because it was not like he was mourning anyone. Instead of answering her straightforwardly, Tobe became defensive and told her never to ask him such personal questions again, in a rude manner. Kosiso was confused, as she didn't mean no harm. She was just curious, and he failed to put her out of her curiosity. He stormed out of her presence in anger and left her all to herself, but her friends were there to console her and made her see reasons why Tobe was never good for her. The way Tobe handled the situation made Kosiso moody and downcast for weeks. She was always in deep thoughts. While she was selling at her shop one fateful day, a young man came to buy some cups of rice from her. He was so enchanted by her beauty and charisma, and Kosiso was also taken away by his charm. He bought what he came for and left. A few days later, Kosiso sprained her knee while going to fetch water at the stream. The road to the stream was lonely, and she could barely stand up and take herself back home. But luckily for her, a young man who was walking along the path stopped to assist her. Kosiso was taken aback when she realized that it was the same man who came to her shop few days ago to buy cups of rice. He introduced himself as Ekene and offered to help her get home since she couldn't walk. She was so grateful to him, and every day after that day, Ekene came to visit Kosiso to make sure that her leg healed properly. Even after she was completely healed, he still always came to see her. They became really close and began dating. Kosiso soon after introduced her best friends to Ekene, as they were like the only family she had. They all had a good time, but when Ekene left, the two friends told Kosiso that they didn't really like Ekene, but there wasn't any concrete reason why they didn't like him. So Kosiso paid them no mind. She was so happy with Ekene, unlike the suspicions she had with Tobe and the arrogance of Amadi. One day, Ekene and Kosiso were taking an evening stroll when a group of men surrounded them. Kosiso soon realized that it was Amadi and some of his warrior friends. He somehow found out about Kosiso and Ekene, then came after them and began threatening Ekene that if he didn't leave Kosiso alone, he would live to regret it. Amadi was warned not to make empty threats, so Kosiso was scared and she reminded him that he had no right to threaten Ekene since she never had anything to do with Amadi. She never agreed to marry him, so why should he come after her to make threats? She became so worried and didn't want anything bad to befall Ekene, but there was little she could do to avoid him, as he was also not ready to leave her side. A few weeks later, there was rumor all around the village that Tobe was a fetish man and went about making sacrifices, and that was how he was able to amass his wealth. It was also as a result of his diabolical practices that he wore only black clothes, as it was a rule in the cult he belonged to. The day he decides to wear any other color of clothes other than black, he would pay dearly for it. The news of Tobe spread like wildfire, and the entire village avoided him like a plague. Evil children ran away from him as if he were a monster. He went to pay a visit to Kosiso, sensing that she might have also heard, and on getting to her house, he realized that she was also informed of the rumor going around town because of her countenance towards him. She acted repulsive and didn't even want to hear anything from him. Kosiso asked him if the rumors were true, and in shame he affirmed that they were true. She realized that was the reason he always acted cold and angry whenever she asked about his choice of clothes. Tobe further promised to be by her side and still love her despite his fetish practices. But Kosiso knew that she would never have anything to do with him, no matter what he said to convince her. She asked him to leave and never return, as she didn't want to have anything to do with him again. She was so broken and found it difficult to believe that she had been entertaining a diabolical man. She also remembered that Amadi had threatened to deal with her and Ekene if he saw or heard that they were still together. All this made her feel trapped and devastated, but her friends were there to give her support and cheer her up. Despite Amadi's stern warning to Kosiso and Ekene, the both of them still sought secretly to avoid drawing the attention of Amadi and incurring his wrath. So one day, Ekene surprised Kosiso by proposing to her. She was so excited but also scared of the unknown. She accepted the ring and went back home that day to tell her friends, Ifeoma and Uzo, about the proposal, but she didn't expect the reaction she got from them. "Are you out of your senses?" Ifeoma asked her. "So after all you found out about Tobe being in a cult and Amadi threatening your life, you still want to go ahead to get married to Ekene? How are you even sure that he is not in the same cult as Tobe?" Kosiso was dumbfounded. She had never thought of it that way, and she knew that her friends would never mislead her. She gave it a deep thought and realized that her friends might be right. It was best to protect her life instead of losing it just because she wanted to get married to a man. The next day, with tears in her eyes and in so much pain, she returned the ring back to Ekene and told him that she was calling off the engagement, stating all her reasons to him. He found it difficult to believe. He was not scared of Amadi, neither did he indulge in fetish practices. He tried convincing her, but he saw that her mind was already made up, so he let her be. Calling off the engagement was not something she wanted to do, so she was in so much pain. She cried uncontrollably to her friends and was regretting her actions, but they convinced her that she made the best decision for herself. She had to accept her fate, but she wasn't happy. She was still in anguish for weeks. So one night, she went to bed and in her dream, she was crying profusely as she did in real life. Then the spirit appeared to her and comforted her. It seemed like the spirit knew her story and felt all her pain. It asked her to go ahead and marry Ekene, and immediately the spirit told her that Kosiso felt assured and immediately stopped crying in her dream. She awoke with so much confidence and assurance of what to do. She knew that was not an ordinary dream, so she made sure to do as she was told. Without wasting any time, she went to Ekene's house and explained to him that she was just scared and informed him that she would like to go ahead with the marriage. Ekene was more than willing to also carry on with the marriage, so they quietly planned it without letting too many people know about it. It was 2 weeks to the wedding before Kosiso informed other people about it. Ifeoma and Uzo felt left out from the plans and were furious that she still carried on with the wedding without informing them earlier, but they understood her and wished her well. The news of Kosiso's marriage spread all around and the men of the village envied Ekene for being the one who finally ended up with Kosiso. Tobe and Amadi came at different intervals to ask Kosiso to have a rethink of her choice of getting married to Ekene because they wanted to be the ones to walk her down the aisle, but she turned down their requests. The day of her wedding came finally, and she was dressed up that day so beautifully. She was so happy and grateful for that day and couldn't wait to become Ekene's wife, when her best friends came to her and quietly informed her that Tobe and Amadi wanted to have a last word with her at the abandoned well just close to the house before she was married off. She wondered what must be so important that they couldn't wait after her wedding. She was so happy that she didn't even think twice about it. Besides, no one could stop her from getting married to Ekene at that point. She went to the abandoned well as she was told and found both men there. "What do both of you have to say to me that cannot wait?" Kosiso asked innocently. Amadi and Tobe opened up to her that they were sorry for causing her any troubles in the past and for forcing her to get married to them. They apologized and told her that they were genuinely happy for her and wished her well in her new home. Kosiso was happy that things had been settled amicably between she and her ex-suitors. Then she was about going back to continue preparations when all of a sudden, a powdery substance was blown onto her face. She immediately became dizzy, tripped, and fell into the dark abandoned well. She hit her head and went unconscious. Back at the house, the wedding was about to begin and everyone was looking for the bride. It was surprising. "I thought she was back from seeing Tobe and Amadi," Uzo asked Ifeoma. It turned out that she never came back from seeing the men. So both women opened up to the crowd that Kosiso went out to see Tobe and Amadi briefly, but she never came back. There was an uproar. "So she's still going out to see other men, even on her wedding day?" one of the guests responded. Ekene, her husband-to-be, was also very bothered and created a search party to go in search of his wife. People searched and searched, but Kosiso was nowhere to be found. Some others believed that she ran away because she wanted to be with another man instead of Ekene. After so many hours of searching, a search party heard screams coming from the distance. They followed the voice and realized that the screams were coming from the abandoned well, and it was Kosiso that was in it. She had regained consciousness and she began screaming for help. They rescued her from the cold, deep well, and she narrated all she could remember. According to her, after speaking to Tobe and Amadi, someone poured a substance on her and she blacked out and fell into the well. She didn't know how it all happened because it happened so fast. Tobe and Amadi were summoned and interrogated, but they denied ever pushing Kosiso into the well. They said they could never do such as they had accepted their fate, as she was not going to be with any of them again. People made snide comments saying that both men were jealous. That was the reason they wanted to end her life. No one believed them, including Kosiso. The village chief priest was called on, so Tobe and Amadi were asked to confess what they did. Else, the chief priest would perform a ritual, and if they were the culprits, they would run mad. Tobe and Amadi asked the chief priest to carry on with the ritual, as they were sure that they were innocent, so they had nothing to fear. The chief priest went on with the ritual and announced that both men were free. He stated that the culprit was among the crowd and asked that the person confess, else he would carry out another ritual to reveal who it was, and the person would bear the consequences of their action. Nobody was bold enough to own up to the crime. Everyone looked around, wondering who must have committed such wicked acts. Most people suspected Ekene to be the guilty person because Kosiso was a successful businesswoman and he might have wanted to acquire her wealth, hence his intent to kill her. The chief priest proceeded with the ritual, but before he concluded, Ifoma and Uzo, the best friends of Kosiso, came out and started pleading and confessing to the crime. They confessed that they had always been jealous of Kosiso and never wanted her to get married to anyone. That was the reason they advised her never to settle for any man. So when she went behind their back to get married to Ekene, they were furious, but they couldn't stop her then to avoid making any suspicious moves. So they decided to lure her to the abandoned well on her wedding day and told Tobe and Amadi that Kosiso wanted to see them. They pushed her in there because they knew no one would suspect that she was there and hoped that she wasn't going to survive it. Then, if the villagers were to look for a suspect, Tobe and Amadi would be the most likely suspects. Kosiso was shocked down to her marrows. The people she took as sisters connived to end her life. She realized that even when Amadi threatened her then, it was her friends that told him about her seeing Ekene. So many things were revealed at that point. Everyone was furious, and both women were exiled from the village at that instant, never to return again. Kosiso was still in denial for weeks and still found it difficult to accept her reality. A few months later, she and Ekene eventually got married and lived happily away from her evil friends. One of the lessons we can learn from this story is to remember that nothing can be hidden forever under the sun. So we must be careful of our dealings with others. We should also make sure to follow our hearts when confused about a situation, especially when our intuition keeps speaking to us about a particular thing. We should also learn not to divulge personal information to enemies who claim to be friends, else it could be used against us. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and turn on your post notification to get notified when next I post a new video. Bye!